I've done the unmuting, which means that this is now live on the internet. No one in the room can hear me, but this is live on the internet. My small...
Think before you speak.
It's fine. I also feel like I totally missed a memo on Christmas jumpers. Yeah, but someone had to lend me the hat, you know. Right. Okay, well, so people are wandering in. I'm forgetting that the stream's running. We're all good.
It is running.
Okay.
I think we can start.
Well, I think we should probably start then. So, Hi everyone. Welcome everyone to London Apple Lab in December. So we never have any of these, and then all of a sudden two turn up at once. November, December. There will not be one there won't be one in January, will there? There's not a chance.
Maybe.
So yeah, thanks Jigsaw for hosting. Thanks Workbrew for making beer and pizza happen. We really appreciate it. And without any further ado, we should probably go and find a Jack Hollister and get him to talk about AI and things. You'll need to look after the nice little microphone.
I think you must have all
Right,
been
let's
very
unplug
good
this.
this year because we've got 5 tools.
Right.
There's nothing incriminating. So fun fact, every device I have has this wallpaper. Even my gaming PC has this. So it's the best wallpaper that Apple ever did. Fight me. So, there we go. I do feel like a TikToker with the... No, sorry. What do you think? So yeah, so this is not another AI talk. And I'm just going to realise I haven't set up Keynote properly, so I can't actually see any of my notes. There we go. So actually, before I go into this, when I was putting the finishing touches to this this afternoon, because all the best presentations are done about 4 minutes before you deliver them, John Cleese has a really good quote where he says the creative people utilise maximum pondering time. So whenever you're working on your projects, and people are like, well, the deadline's next week, I want to see, but like, no. So there's always a valid excuse that you finish doing it the seconds before you actually deliver it, because John Cleese says it's okay. So yeah, so I'm going to do, well, no, it's not another, it is AI, unfortunately. So the scenario the scenario I'm going to sort of talk about and some of the work I've been doing is around the idea of, we've all been in meetings with senior people that like to say we need AI because they've, I don't know, seen a YouTube short or have read something in Gartner and are like, right, we're going to need AI. And it's generally like a back and forth of, well, what do you actually mean? And like, well, we need AI. And then it comes back and you're like, well, what do you actually mean? And just the general idea is, they don't know, they just know that they need some form of AI. And with the customers that I've been sort of chatting to, and even like our own internal projects, is that everyone is saying, can we have a solution to this? And like, well, what are we actually trying to fix? What is the thing that we're trying to make better for our users? What are the things we're trying to make better for our customers? And I don't really think that there's many scenarios where people go, actually, this is a specific thing that we're doing. What can we do to perhaps introduce some AI-related workflow into that? And when we sort of look at sort of like the heavy hitters in this space, we might use this for our own research, content generation, if we're perhaps doing some development work, brainstorming, sometimes depending on your colleagues, intelligent conversation, or the most important one is meme creation, as those that was at Mackay may have seen a few very interesting generated photos of that, of what took place there. But look, and I think it's always important to think, what sort of stuff do I do in my day-to-day that I could like empower with bringing in some form of workflow? Like for me, like brainstorming is like a huge one, because I'll like put my headset on and I'll just like almost like just lay on the floor and just like talk into the abyss and just get the abyss to take loads of notes about what it is I'm trying to get out of my head and then formulate what I'm doing. So like for me, being able to have that as an AI workflow is great for my job. But for my colleagues that are in our DevOps team, perhaps for them, it's more around researching around sort of modules they're bringing into the products that they're building. So for them, it's more around like writing code. And I think like as a business, sort of actually understanding what the different teams are doing, and then hopefully trying to map that into then what leadership are going around AI, we can start building some bridges. Because saying that you just want AI is the equivalent of going into the Apple store and saying, "I'll just have one technology, please." and yeah, I don't think that would go down too well. But yeah, but 9 out of 10 times, it's usually a conversational requirement. And when we sort of like start to strip apart what goes on with a large language model, I'm sure everyone in this room has interacted with some form of LLM, whether that's through apps on their phone or in the browser. When we actually look at what is actually happening underneath the hood, so we have the prompt. And actually the art of the prompt is quite a valuable skill set to even have. Like earlier today, I was working with our marketing team, and even just like saying, get the tool to actually write the prompt for you, explain what it is you're trying to do, and then say, how would I write a prompt, and then get that to actually feedback. And then that way we can start learning how we interact with these machines. We can't just go, I would like answer please, because it's not going to be a very good output. I think our colleague Mark Hull had a very good co-pilot talk, which was it was the one of the emojis that may have been the poo emoji on one side and then the sparkly poo on the other side. It's like shit in, shit out. You've got to be accurate with what it is we're putting into this technology. And then after we put in that prompt, we've got the training data that it's analysing. So that might be what we're doing with our own RAG processes. Perhaps we've got a database of information that it's feeding off of. And then it's converting what we're asking and the data it has into a language that the LLM understands. And then it passes it to the model. Now this bit's really interesting because when I started my journey understanding about AI, I didn't realise how many different models there were and how many different approaches that they all have. Like there's ones that's sort of dedicated for like more, I know, like world building, like story writing, like putting together like language for people to be reading. There's ones that then more focus on how do you then turn it into, say, audio or video. And then that model understanding what it is you've just put into it. And then the reasoning side. Now we've all seen sort of headlines around sort of like what NVIDIA's doing with their crazy like graphics card technology they've been building, and the sheer sort of like volume of like infrastructure required to sort of like just handle this aspect. And there's also a bit of maybe there's an eco conversation to say there, how much energy are we spending on this for the output that we're getting. But I'm not going to go into the green eco-activist stuff tonight. And then inference is around the prediction of how those tokens are being processed and then applying those patterns that model's been built for to generate that response. And then the output hopefully is something that's useful. So with that in mind, when we're looking at what can we do with bringing AI into our environments, there's a question going, well, what can I do as a Mac admin, as an engineer, as a technical individual within a team? What's something I can interact with in a meaningful way? Which I think that's quite important, because sometimes people just chuck apps in and then just go, be productive. And that doesn't really help the end user experience. One that doesn't fold the budget in half. I don't know if you've seen the prices of some of these graphics cards if you've got to build your own infrastructure, or even the costs of like doing large team rollouts of some of these cloud technologies. But most importantly for me is like the solutioneering itch that's just like, I want to go and build something and I want to go do it in a way that I at least feel rewarded for the work that I put in. Now this is where we sort of like dive into like your non-ARM, so the x86 hardware, of what is that relationship between the processor and the RAM, and then how the graphics card handles the video RAM as well. Because all of these processes around AI, it's the graphics card and the memory that graphics card has that's the most important piece. And there's a limiting factor with the more standard setup of having it in a processor graphics card configuration, which unless you're lucky enough to have a graphics card with 100 gig of VRAM in, but depending on what your budgets are like, that's not an easy thing to just go out and acquire. and the power required to power it is a pretty large expense as well. But if we look at what happens on this device here, so our Macs that we've already got laid around our estate, all of our users, hopefully a high percentage of them are using Macs. The way that unified memory works is that it's that shared resource, and all of this is on a single chip, so every interaction operates at a much faster speed than perhaps what we would do in a typical setup. And the reason that this is really important is that if we think about a Mac Mini that might have 16 gig, 32 gig of RAM, or even a Mac Studio that has like 512 gig of RAM, to be able to have access to that immediately for the graphics card, it's quite an interesting scenario of going, I've actually got an ecosystem here that I could use for these AI workflows. So what can I do to take advantage of this? So I like to, for one of the projects I was working on, I wanted to split out the use case of the different types of employees. So I've got my project manager, my DevOps team, and then I've got our creatives with the big Mac Studios. And then I think if we start marrying up what the device hardware performance is, so like I've got my project manager with a 16 gig MacBook Air, how are they going to interact with it? They've probably been given a scope of work or a technical document from an engineer that's going on to do a project, and they need to like understand it or translate it for a project meeting. Now, not that I'm saying that any of our colleagues would take a document with sensitive information and just upload it into ChatGPT on the internet with all that sensitive information. None of our employees or colleagues would ever do such a thing. But what about a scenario that on their device, they've got a LLM that's perhaps built for processing data and doing document writing? Well, perhaps that can happen on the Mac device itself. And then as we look across the estate, we've got things such as the Gwen model, which is built more for the programming user. And then the really cool stuff, if you're lucky enough to have any Mac Studios, being able to run like the 70 billion parameter Llama model, which you're going to start like getting competitive edge against what some of the cloud providers have. Being able to run huge models. And actually, what if we have that Mac Studio and we make that a piece of our infrastructure, we have that model on it, and then we start using that instead of what's going on in the cloud. And we can start sort of building a safer environment of, well, if I've got my Mac Studio here, and then I've got my internal repository of all my data, I can do all of the RAG workflows, which is retrieval augmented generation, which is being able to refer back to a specific data set rather than having to think about it from scratch every time. And now I've got that closed loop ecosystem. And then depending on what tools you've got, being able to have a web interface there, and then having your end users just interact with that. And now you've got like an air-gapped environment that you can have that same powerful ChatGPT-esque AI experience. The most important thing is you're in control of the data, you're in control of the risk, and we're sort of like democratizing the ability so that more people can have access to really powerful LLM workflows, rather than the only option being we're going to need to subscribe to one of the cloud providers. So this is one sort of scenario, and this is stuff that I've been working on with quite a few different organizations, some of them in the law firm landscape, where for them data sensitivity is like super, super important. And then there's some creatives which are doing some really cool stuff where they're going, actually, we've got all this data of how we create content. We've got almost our print, our tone of how we write stuff. We actually want to have this as a central resource so that as anyone that joins the team can start interacting with that, start generating information that's got a vibe, to use a better word, on. But then the security team's happy because the business is completely responsible for the risk rather than just sending it up into the cloud. And then the other approach is, perhaps if you've just started your AI strategy, is how can we do this in a safe way that we can actually start understanding how users are interacting with this technology, and then use that to build our AI strategy. So another scenario, so a llama, which I like to use just because purely the logo's really cool. Being able to have, perhaps using your MDM tool to deploy the Llama application, perhaps writing a cool script to analyze how much RAM that's got, and then changing the model that we're deploying to that device as a part of that workflow. and then now training users to know that they've got a application on their device that they can start interacting with, start using as if they would a ChatGPT. So we're not taking away their freedom to use an LLM, but we're now giving them a safe environment to start understanding perhaps why they would want to use that, and then having that feedback loop the same way that we might do for making changes to our device build configuration, understanding that feedback from the end user, and then now I can start using that data to then build what our AI strategy is. And it may be that the end goal is that you end up going to the cloud for a specific use case, but the most important bit is that your POC phase, you was in complete control of the sort of like the risk and the security of your data. And also it's a pretty cool project to sort of get involved with. That's sort of like a little bit outside of perhaps the standard tech that we interact with on a day-to-day. And then there's the final scenario. It's like, well, how, if we were going to build this ourselves, how would this scale? And there's quite a few now different providers. You've got the likes of, say, Web AI that have started building like full enterprise-grade infrastructure for building your own AI appliance. There's also, on the open source side, the guys over at Exolabs have been building some really cool stuff that allow you to deploy it perhaps on my MacBook Pro, on my Mac Mini, and perhaps I've got someone else's device on my network, and actually create a ecosystem of AI-enabled appliances. And the cool thing there is that you can now split the model across the RAM of all these different devices, so that if you've got perhaps a surplus of Mac Minis, you can start clustering those together, connecting them through the network, especially with like the new studio devices that supports a way higher network speed over Thunderbolt. Being able to do that and share the resource across all of that creates some really powerful workflows that you can do. And it may already be on hardware that you own. So again, isn't a huge cost to then bring into the environment. They've got an open source variant of this. I believe that if you want to be a paying customer, they've got loads of other stuff that they do. But I've been working with creatives around building some like POC environments for this. We're doing a similar project internally. I've got a couple of Mac Minis at home that I'm running this on. And yeah, that's pretty much like my sort of journey. Like this year, I've been focusing on sort of like building AI workflows, and just want to say thanks for letting me ramble on about some AI stuff. And there's some resources here. I'll share an extended version in the when I upload it into the on the site. I don't have a blog. I do make jangle pop music, so if you like that, we have this one here, because who likes a free plug? Yeah, cheers, thank you. I was going to say, I don't know if we've got time for any questions, but I'm happy to chat afterwards, but Chris, were you?
Oh yeah, I was going to say, so I was going to mention Hugging Face, but with Hugging Face, how do you know those LLMs aren't tampered with? Because that's why I'm wary about going there.
So you
can stick their own code in there, just bypass exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
You would never know.
So this is obviously the biggest challenge with open source, is being able to vet what it is that you're bringing down. There's probably even a question there around Homebrew, and just taking it from the generalized audience, that actually having a process around that and doing your own testing is an important part of that. But I would say on Hugging Face, I would also say the names of these AI stuff is ridiculous. When I'm trying to tell some of our leadership, it's like, right, we're going to get this from Hugging Face, and we're going to get Llama to then run this workflow. They're looking at me going, what are you talking about? But yeah, there's obviously the main providers like Meta, OpenAI. It's really good to see that OpenAI have open sourced their models as well, given where their business started. But I think that's where testing and not just dragging a random thing. This whole thing is around taking responsibility of the risk, and not just chucking random stuff onto.
Yeah, because there's an app I use actually on my Mac. It's called Private LLM.
Yep.
That I've used before, and then it's got all of these. Yeah, you can just download them.
Yeah, because you've got LLM Studio, Private LLM, Llama. Yeah, there's loads of ones out there, but
basically Llama, private cloud at the moment.
Yeah. The most important thing is that you're in control of that, and you're building it yourself, especially for your own business as well.
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
Yeah, but yeah, if anyone else wants to sort of chat around this sort of stuff, I've got some other things I can show. But thanks for letting me chat about this. Thanks everyone.
very much, Jack.
Drop that down.
And up next, we've got John.
See it over here.
There we go. We're live as well.
Alrighty. Thank you. Sorry about the setup delay. So first of all, hi everybody. My name is John. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Workbrew. We make an enterprise-ready version of Homebrew, so you can manage everything. Today's talk is about Homebrew security model and kind of how you can use Homebrew to send potentially malicious software onto target devices and ways that you can protect against that. Let's see if this gives me the ability to advance. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start with the description of Homebrew, just in case anybody's behind and doesn't have a full understanding. I'll give a little bit of context on that. Then we'll talk about taps, which is how Homebrew collects packages and makes them available, and how you can create your own taps, and how you can create your own packages. And then we're going to talk about updating. This is probably the thing I hear about all the time. How do I keep my Homebrew instances and all of my Homebrew packages up to date on my devices? There's some automation available. There's some things that are built into Homebrew. There's some third-party products that you can use as well, or open source projects, I should say. And then lastly, we'll talk about some security policies before going into Q&A. Since it's a short talk, I'm going to keep it pretty high level, but at the end, if you have any questions, I'm happy to go into more detail. So first of all, what is Homebrew? When I think about this and how to explain it to people, of all different types of knowledge in this space, I like to think about it as the #1 app store for developers. If you're a developer and you're using a Mac, I'd be willing to bet that you're using Homebrew. There's something like 15,000 packages in Homebrew. It's open source. There's thousands of contributors, a team of a couple dozen maintainers that are very dedicated to the project. And I would say it's essentially an industry standard. If you're using a Mac, you're probably using Homebrew. One of the things I like to cite is when Apple got up on stage at WWDC and they introduced Apple Silicon. Within a couple of sentences after they said that, you know what they said on stage? They said, Homebrew supported from day one. That's how important this thing is in the Apple ecosystem. So it looks like this. You open up your terminal, you type in a command, you say brew install, whatever you want. Python, Go, Ruby, OpenSSL, you name it, it's in there. And it's not just command line tools, it's also desktop apps, drivers, IDEs. You can even use it to distribute your own internal software. Internal CLIs, tools for data analysis, things that are custom to your organization. It's trusted by tens of millions of developers daily, with 35 million devices estimated installed. It's also multi-platform. Most people think of Homebrew as a Mac OS thing, which I would say 95+% of the users are on Mac OS. But if you go to the Homebrew website, it's brew.sh. There's an analytics page. You can break it down, and it gives you a list of events that have happened in the Homebrew ecosystem based off of what operating system. And you can see that there's a fair number of people using it on Linux. Especially, there's been a growing usage in these couple of new distributions of Linux, Bazzite and Bluefin, which use Brew as their default package manager on Linux, which is pretty cool. And then also it runs on Windows under WSL. So it's a really cool tool. But there are a few problems. First of all, it's designed for the single player use case. So essentially, I'm a developer, I have a Mac, I install this on my device, I'm meant to manage and configure and do everything myself. It's great for an individual developer, but it's terrible. The larger your team gets, the harder it is to kind of manage this. There's no visibility into how things are working, and there's no kind of policy support, any way to manage anything. So this is where my company Workbrew comes in, and I'm happy to talk to you about that later. But what can you do? First, you can just kind of ignore it. This is the most common thing that I hear people do. Look the other way. I talk to a lot of big banks about their problems with the software supply chain. And funny enough, the IT and security folks look at me and they say, we know this is a problem, but if I raise my hand and take responsibility for this, then it's my problem. So I try to avoid that. The second, less common, but pretty popular kind of strategy is to have informed trust. Just training. Teach people how this thing works. It's a sharp knife. Don't cut yourself, right? You want to make sure that the people who are using it know how to evaluate the software that they're adding. It's really easy to trust an upstream source that's providing you with packages. And with Homebrew, it's really nice because the official package or the official sources, the taps, are all human reviewed. So if you contrast this with some language package managers where anybody can publish any package by any name they want, there are things like name squatting, typo squatting kind of attacks that could happen. In the Homebrew ecosystem, it's not impossible, but it's much less likely that something like that will happen. And that's just because there's a human kind of intervention process there. But informing people, making sure they understand how to evaluate whether something is safe or not. And then lastly, we see a lot of really big companies just kind of fork Homebrew and build their own thing. I'm not going to name names, but there's people out there who do this at a very big scale. They have entire teams dedicated against this, and that's probably out of reach for most of us. I didn't say it. So yeah, another just like this is that analytics page I was telling you about on the Homebrew website. You can see within a 1-year period, 250 million events logged. This is for devices that have analytics turned on, which you can opt out of these analytics. They're all anonymous, and that's in a 1-year period. And this is only for formula installs. So this isn't like all events in Homebrew. There's 250 million times the formula has been installed in the past year using Homebrew. So it's a very, very popular tool that's in use pretty much everywhere. So let's talk about taps. First of all, what is a tap? In Homebrew speak, the original creator of Homebrew, Max Howells, there's a whole story. You can go read about this online, but he had, for some reason, this idea to give everything a beer theme. So taps are, the repository that contains all the packages. And within a tap, you have a list of different packages you can install. And Homebrew has 2 very popular, official taps: Homebrew Core, which contains open source based packages, and Homebrew Cask, which contains binary based packages. So Homebrew Core will have, things like OpenSSL, your programming languages, different kinds of libraries, things like Postgres, MongoDB, things where the source code's available. Homebrew builds it for you and puts those binaries onto your device. Now, if you're looking at this from a supply chain perspective, how do you trust, what's in there? Well, you have to trust that the official Homebrew project is getting those sources from where they're getting it, where they say they're getting them from the trusted upstream, and then they're building those binaries, and then those binaries that they're building have not been tampered with before they were delivered to your machine. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we can go into about signing those binaries and how Homebrew does this. I'd really encourage you to look into artifact attestation. There's an entire blog post about this on the Homebrew blog. There's an article about it on the GitHub blog with GitHub Actions you can read about. But essentially what they do is they make it so that when Homebrew builds the binary, there's a GitHub Actions runner that builds the binary for you. And that GitHub Actions runner has access to some cryptographic signature mechanisms that say, I built this binary on this date and time on this particular GitHub Actions runner using this code. So you can see the code and audit it. And then that's shipped down with the binary down to your device. And there's actually a check in the Homebrew code base that lets you ensure that those artifact attestations are correct. On the Cask side, it's a little bit different. Those are binaries, and we just depend on Gatekeeper. Apple has this great system with notarization. You can staple, notarization to the binary, and when you download the package, Apple will say, "Hey, this is not okay." So those are kind of the things that we have built in. But yeah, talking about taps. So what is a tap, actually? A tap is actually just text. There's no protocol for it. It's just plain text, Ruby files, interpreted Ruby code using a domain-specific language, a DSL. This is essentially a way to write code that's more human-friendly, but it's really easy and nice to parse, but it actually executes. And this doesn't need to be a Git repository, but generally, they are Git repositories. And Homebrew is built by default to look at GitHub as the source of all those Git repositories, unless you specify otherwise. So if you wanted to go and create your own Homebrew tap, the way to do this would be to create a Git repository or a bunch of files. And in that Git repository, you would create formula or casks. Formula for source code-based packages, cask for binary-based packages. And then you would use that tap from your endpoint, from your device that has macOS installed or Linux, and you would connect and download the tap, and it would basically give Homebrew arbitrary third-party code that it can execute to then go install those things. So you can see how this could be really dangerous. So you should always be very careful about what third-party taps you use. Make sure you trust the people who are giving you those taps. Obviously, if it's within your own company and it's your team, you should probably be able to trust that. But outside parties, you should be a little bit more cautious. So inside of the tap, it looks something like this. On the left side, you have a formula, and on the right side, you just have a simple script. So the formula just goes through and says, here's a description, here's the name of the package, here's the location of the file that needs to be installed, what version it is, a couple things. It's very, very simple domain-specific language for defining these packages. And then on the right, we just have a script that says hello, right? Nothing fancy. As an attacker, this is all you need to do to create arbitrary code that will run on the device of your target machine. So what you need to get your target to do, you just need to get them to run brew tap and the name of the Git repo. So this was prepared by one of my colleagues, Chris, and you can see he has this test tap on his repository on GitHub. And this will just add that right into your Homebrew instance on your device and make it available, any arbitrary third-party code. So you could see this could be obfuscated JavaScript, this could be a binary file, it could be a simple bash script, whatever you want. It's a really, really easy way to get arbitrary code onto your device. So the lesson here is be very careful about what third-party taps you use, and we'll talk about ways to mitigate the usage of third-party taps a little bit later. The challenge here is that there's a huge amount of trust among developers, and there's a lot of people who use Homebrew who don't even know, what it is or how it works. So they don't understand that adding a third-party tap is just executing third-party, arbitrary code on your machine. And so you have to, kind of get these folks to understand, hey, you need to be cautious about what you're doing. This here is an example. It's a tweet I saw a couple months back of people creating malicious fake Homebrew websites. So people know what Homebrew is, they hear some instructions, I need to go install Homebrew, and then run some commands to get up and running in my environment. And this is a malicious Google ad taking to a fake imposter Homebrew site that will get you to install arbitrary third-party code that does whatever bad stuff they want to do. So you always need to be able to check this stuff. Okay, so now we've talked about getting bad code on your machine. Let's talk about another vector, which is just keeping things up to date. So in Homebrew, we have two commands, brew update and brew upgrade. Does anybody know the difference between the two?
Update updates Homebrew itself, upgrade updates the packages you have installed.
Nailed it. So because Homebrew is itself a Git repository with a bunch of code in it, and those taps are also Git repositories with all the formulas in it, you need to keep those in sync with the latest versions. So you run brew update, and that will give you the latest versions of all the formulas, the latest versions of the brew command, all that kind of stuff. But if you want to actually upgrade your packages, you need to use the brew upgrade command and run those. Now, Homebrew has a little bit of auto updating built into it. There's a configuration option called Homebrew Auto Update Secs, where you can set a number of seconds to do auto updates. So every X amount of time, we will auto update Homebrew. Now, Homebrew doesn't run as a daemon, it's a command line tool, so you run it and it exits and it doesn't run again. So what this means is it's a minimum threshold, right? It's guaranteeing you that if you run brew again, the next time you run brew, it will auto update at that time if the number of seconds has elapsed. So this is kind of helpful. You might get this message from time to time that says, hey, we're updating Homebrew. I didn't ask for an update, but it's doing it. So it'll go and pull down the Git repo and all that stuff. And then if you want to upgrade, this is the command that you can use. So you can do brew update. That'll get you on the latest version of brew and all the formulas. And then you can say brew upgrade, which will upgrade your packages. And then brew upgrade -- greedy. And this is one that trips people up a lot. So in Homebrew Cask, you can install binary applications. So let's use a common one like Slack or Zoom. Many of those apps have auto updaters built into them. And in the Homebrew Cask definition, it shows this is an auto updating app. So when you run brew upgrade, it doesn't bother with it because it knows it auto updates itself. So brew won't upgrade those in place unless you pass this flag -- greedy, in which case your Cask will get updated, regardless of if the auto updater ran or not. So that's a little bit about that. You could add this to a bash script and then set a cron job so this runs on a regular cadence, and now you have auto updating and auto upgrading without buying anything, without using anything else. Now, there is another project out there that's called Homebrew Auto Update, and it's on this repo called DOM-T4. So this person created this project, which is an extension to Homebrew. As an aside, Homebrew, the way it's architected, every command in Brew, so like brew upgrade, brew update, is modular. And this is a really nice thing from a contribution perspective. You can actually go and write your own brew commands, just following the model of what Homebrew does, how they define them, and you can add your own functions into Homebrew this way. And what's really nice is they don't have to be in the Homebrew code base. So you can create your own Git repository, define your own Homebrew command, and then install those commands into Homebrew for your company, right, or for your users or for yourself. And so this person, when they created this Homebrew auto updater, that's what they did. So it looks and feels as if it's part of Homebrew. So you can have brew auto update start, and then you tell it the interval and the number, like whatever options you want to give it. And this will add like a launch daemon to the Mac OS, launch runner or whatever you call it. It will run those upgrade commands for you on a regular cadence. This was actually incorporated into the Homebrew project at one point. So it got merged in, and then it got removed after a while due to maintenance issues. But it's still active, and you can use it. So I definitely recommend, if keeping this stuff up to date is important to you, you check that out. Lastly, I want to talk about how you can tighten up some of the things on Homebrew yourself. So Homebrew can be configured by the end user however they like, and there are 4 ways you can configure Homebrew. There's a system-wide configuration file. It lives in etc homebrew brew.env. There's a user-specific Homebrew configuration file that lives in your home directory under brew.env or something like that. You have to look it up on the docs to know exactly where it is. But yeah, here it's right here. So you have your etc homebrew brew.env, etc homebrew brew.env in your Homebrew prefix, and then you have it in your home folder, and so on. And then the last option for setting these configurations is in the environment. So as a dev, I can open up my bash config or my zshrc, whatever, and put a bunch of config options for Homebrew in there, set as environment variables, and every time Homebrew is invoked, those options will be set. The last thing that you need to do here is these are kind of like cascading, configuration options. So the environment variables override my project-specific variables, which override my user-specific variables, which override my system-wide variables, right? There is an option in Homebrew called Homebrew system env takes priority, which basically says if it's defined at the system level, do not let the end user to override it. This was added partially for some of the work we were doing at Workbrew to make it so that system administrators could lock this stuff down. So all of this to say that you now have the ability to configure the way Brew works for your users, including things like Homebrew allowed taps. So if we understand that third-party taps are dangerous, they can run arbitrary code, they can install any packages in the world, and we want to limit that, we need to make sure that this is set. Homebrew allowed taps equals Homebrew core, Homebrew cask, that's it. If you have an internal tap, maybe you put the name of your internal tap in here as well, but that will vastly limit the surface attack vectors of things in Homebrew. And then you'll probably want to set this one as well, which is this system env takes priority, so that the user can't just easily change that in their home folder or in their environment. But then if your user has admin privileges, they could always edit the config file on disk. So you gotta do something with your MDM, make sure they can't tamper with it, et cetera, et cetera. Some other interesting things that you can do. You can use this config option called Homebrew forbidden formula, which allows you to set a list of blocked packages. So you could say, for example, I don't want people to install ngrok, which is a tunneling software that you can use to expose internal resources to the public internet. So you might have like a web server running on your machine, you run ngrok, anybody in the world can access it. So you can disable that. Another one is, we talked about Homebrew forbidden taps. Homebrew forbid packages from paths. This is another one where you can actually, instead of going out to the network and fetching it from a tap there, you could actually have a tap on disk and or a formula on disk and run that formula. So you can set all of those kinds of things. Let's see here. Here we go. Following up on just the overall security of Homebrew, a couple of years ago, the Homebrew project worked with a firm called Trail of Bits, which is I'd say a pretty well-known open source security auditing firm. They did a full in-depth code audit of Homebrew, provided the Homebrew team with a private copy of that assessment, which then went and they did a bunch of security reviews and fixed a lot of those problems. Homebrew then later published the report, put up a blog post about it. Trail of Bits also has a blog post on their website that covers a lot of these remediations and fixes as well. So the project is very, very focused on making sure things stay secure, and it's up to you to go out and evaluate how you want to handle this. So I hope that you've learned a couple of things about how Homebrew is potentially dangerous and how you can fix those things. I would like to emphasize that I don't think Homebrew itself is dangerous. I think it's like any tool, you need to know how to use it. You need to know what the sharp edges are. Try to avoid those. And if you have more and more devices in this kind of environment, the problem gets more complex. So yeah, I'd like to move to Q&A. If anybody has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them and go into more detail. None? Anybody? I've explained it so well that there are no questions. Great. I'm going to put up this QR code as well. If you want to be in touch with me, just snap this QR code. There's a little form you can fill out. You can download a PDF of that gives you all kinds of Homebrew commands, goes over a lot of these configuration options. But if you fill that out, I'll also send you an email with my contact info, and we can chat more. Obviously, I am a founder of a company. We're building tools that solve these kind of problems for your companies. If you want to talk about that, come chat with me later. I'll let you take a picture. And then lastly, we have that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Brilliant. Fantastic. Yeah, by the way,
I'll get this later.
Thanks, John. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
By the way, so our fellow herder Graham Gilbert did ask us to make a cheeky mention of his project Carafe, which is related to this. So I'll say them. Okay, shall we take 5 minutes?
Maybe we are a little bit over.
We're a little bit over.
Do one more.
We'll do one more and then we'll have a break.
No question. I might grab it.
Yes, I've got my phone one sec.
Because we're taking a break or are we going there?
We're going to go.
I think we'll. Yeah.
Yeah, just give it again. Right. So next up, we've got Luke.
Hello.
It's live at the moment.
Hey everyone. Just give me 1 second. Look at this, I'm really using the tech here. That's big. Sorry guys. Smash that over here and then we're good to go. Hello. Hey everyone. So when I spoke to Daz before coming, I said to him, I don't have any slides. And he was like, can you at least do one with your name on it? So I did a slide. There is actually, I went overboard. I actually did 7 slides. Although we won't spend much time on the slides. So this talk is called Upgrade Manager, Solving Software Updates and My Identity Crisis. My name is Luke Allen. It's a pleasure to meet you if I've not met you before. I know some of the people in the room. I'm a consulting engineer for Apple Technologies. I work at a company called Jamf. And that's what we're going to talk about. So I must say the slides are there's not much to them. That's it. That's and the rest of the slides are not much different either. So let's get the existential crisis bit out of the way. Last summer, so I've been doing this for a while. Before I've worked at Jamf for like almost 5 years, five years next year, 1st of March. It's very easy to remember because I'm Welsh and that's St. David's Day. Probably the one person in the room. I've been at Jamf for 5 years. At that time, I'd been at Jamf for like 4 years. And prior to that, I'd worked at Apple on the in the systems engineering team at Apple. And I had worked there for just about 8 years. And so for my entire professional career, I had kind of worked the same job effectively, which is being able to, and things that everybody in this room does, which is new tech comes out, I learn about the tech, and then I spend a lot of my time testing it, implementing it, and talking to customers on behalf of tech companies to explain to people how it works and how to do that at scale in a way that's secure and scalable. And I felt like a bit of a fraud. So at the time, I didn't have a child, and so now I don't have time to feel like this. But at that time, I felt like a bit of a fraud, and I felt like I'm basically standing on the shoulders of all the giants before me who have built all this cool tech, and I'm basically just a person that like reads the manual and then tells people how it works. And I felt a bit like I felt like a fraud. And so like prior to like working this job, like I went to university and I studied computer games development, so I do have a background in app development. And my manager, Misha, who I'm sure a lot of you know, said to me at the time, like, hey, I think like you have a background in app development. Why don't you do something with app development? And like he didn't know that I felt this way, but it came at like the perfect time. And so that led me to software update. So I don't know why I chose software update. I mean, it's something that's personal, like it's a personal interest to me, but I was like, I want to build something that makes software update a little bit simpler and easier for people. I did a talk, it wasn't this, but I did a talk that was like not dissimilar to this, like about a month ago. And I asked everybody to do this task. I'm going to ask everybody to do it again if that's okay. I promise you, I know that we have people in the room who like don't like to be singled out and they're like, you know, like to keep to themselves. I promise you, I will not pick on any one of you. Would you all humor me and close your eyes, because this is an anonymous vote. So everyone, there is complete honesty in this room. We need to respect everybody. So eyes closed. Please stick your hand up loud and proud if you have actually read Apple's documentation on software update. Everyone put your hands down. Open your eyes. I can tell you that was a shockingly low number for this group. One of the things that's really hard about software update is that it is so complex. And I have worked, like I said, both for Apple and Jamf, and have spoken to customers over the last decade about how to technically move a device from A to B, from one OS to another. And it has always been really hard. It's been hard for as long as macOS has been around. It's still really hard today. But as like in 2025, it represents one of the most important parts of the job that everybody in this room does every day. And it's become more important than it has ever been to be able to demonstrate, hey, we can easily take our devices remotely from A to B. But it's also really hard to do that stuff. Does everybody feel that's an acceptable assessment? I see nods. That's good. That means this is a relevant talk. So there's a few different reasons for that. And if I talk specifically like close to home and talk about Jamf, there are some really great things that have come this year. So for example, the ability to do always up to date. But because of the nature of software update and the complexity around it, there is so much stuff that needs to be in place before you can technically deliver software update. So if we just talk about the really high level stuff without getting into all the edge case things, your device needs to be supervised, iOS 17 plus, macOS 14 plus, iPadOS 17 plus. It needs to be to use declarative device underpinned software update. It needs to have declarative management enabled. If we're talking about macOS, it needs to have a bootstrap token escrow. What else am I forgetting? Did I say it right? Like those, just those things. If you have just come to the table for the first time and you are grappling with, even if it's not Jamf, if it's any MDM flavor of choice, you're learning about how to deploy apps, how to patch software, how to deploy users, how to manage identity, and then also to know that, hey, there are known exploited vulnerabilities in this version of the OS that came out 3 weeks ago, and all of our fleet is still running it. Like, that's a really difficult place to be. Effectively, mindful that we're being recorded here, so I will temper what I'm going to say, but there are some wonderful developments in the space with Jamf Pro and Jamf School around what we've been doing with, like I said, always up to date and things like that. But there are still some gaps. For example, if I today use blueprints to deploy a software update to my fleet, the way that I then go and track that information is to go one by one and like physically look at it in the GUI and see where it is. If that fails, I have no visibility. I don't really know what happens after I hit that button. And also, unfortunately, if you look at the GUI and being able to schedule software updates, we kind of push a lot of that onus off onto you folks, to the admins. So, for example, you're prompted with a GUI that asks you to put in the version of the operating system that you'd like to upgrade to. And on paper, from a design perspective, that makes a lot of sense. But that means that there's a lot of work for you folks to go out there and actually create smart groups to identify those devices. So ultimately, we've kind of like taken a lot of esoteric knowledge, and apparently 3 people in this room have read that esoteric knowledge, and we've pushed it over to you folks. So what I did was I've come up with a little application and solved some of my imposter syndrome by making this little app. So before I demo it, and we're doing okay for time, which is good, the app is called Upgrade Manager. It is a universal app, although it currently only works on iOS, but macOS and iPadOS are coming. The idea is that it provides you with a simple, non-technical way to be able to view devices in your organization that are not currently up to date, but are capable of receiving the update. So all you do is you launch the app, you can see all your devices that are out of date, you tap, schedule the update, and then you can monitor it in real time as it moves from A to B. So the last thing I'll say before we move on is there'll be a link at the end so that you can access it if you want to use it. It is a Jamf signed app. It's been around since last Tuesday. It is bleeding edge. I wrote it, and nobody else at Jamf. And so it comes with a warning, which is that it has absolutely no customer support, no warranty, no nothing. Do not use this in your live environments because I am the person that wrote it. soon to be added to Brew. Okay, so let me show it to you. So I'm just going to bring a VM up. Very, very difficult to hold this and type. Has anybody ever seen macOS before? Welcome, this is macOS. So this is our Mac. This is Case. And if we go to software update, you can see that unfortunately this Mac is running 15.5, which is very old, and there are lots of known issues with this particular version of macOS. So what I'm going to do is come over to my little app and run it. You can see we've got 2 different versions available. I really am short of time, so I'll be quick with this, but not many people realize, because people don't read the documentation, you can technically use the DDM command to be able to push the latest old version of the operating system. So I can optionally go to 15.7.2, which represents the latest version of 15 that is currently available on site. Or I could jump to 26.1. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up the app. I'm going to go through the setup here. So I'm going to put in my domain. Cool. And then I'm going to put in my credentials. It's very difficult doing this with one hand. All right, everyone close your eyes. Yeah, that was good. Cool, hopefully this should work. Cool, and so like I said, if you see it in this list, it means all those things are true. It's 17 plus, 14 plus, it's supervised, it's been seen recently, it has a bootstrap token escrow, and you can see in the list on the left-hand side, these are the versions that are capable of running on it right now. So here's our device case. You can see it's running 15.5.0. We can see that it's been seen now. We can see the serial number, the name, the model, and we can see which versions are available. Really importantly for this, I wanted to make sure that I wanted this to be non-tech. Like nobody needs to know anything about software update to get this working. So it'll only present versions that are available, and contextually will give you a bit of flavor text as to what is available. So if you can only see a minor, it'll only present you with that minor information, and same with the major. So I'm going to update it. I'm going to say it's 8 o'clock right now. So I'm going to say I want to push the latest minor version to this. Wouldn't matter, but I'm going to choose minor. And one of the things that's cool about the way that software update works is that if you push it for now or in the past, it'll tell the device that it is past due, and it will immediately push the update. So if we move this to one side, you'll see in a second that it takes a couple of seconds for Jamf to send the command, but you'll see in a second that the update will slide in from the left in our VM. If we leave this menu, I will show you the real-time visibility of this. So you can see that it's now past due, and we'll start to download that update. If we go into software update, you'll see after a couple of seconds, it'll start to download. You can see it's being queued. Let's reload this window. Come on now. Here you go. You can see, for some reason, it's not showing it here, but you can see that we are now reporting this in real time, and you can see that we get visibility as the device moves through the process, which is really cool. It works at any kind of scale. So if I wanted to select all of these devices, regardless of what particular device they are, and I wanted to just make them latest and greatest, and I want to do them right now, I can hit update. It'll send the command and move all of them across, and you can see that this was done, it orders them chronologically. And that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. So if I slide back here, wow, that didn't work, did it? So if you're interested to trial this, bearing in mind that I wrote it, it comes with no warranty, no support, no nothing. Jamf.it/upgrade manager would be the place that you would go for that. And with that, I think I'm still on time. I haven't heard a beep yet. So I went through that very, very quickly, but there's a load of stuff that's planned. macOS version is coming. It has cloud, has Swift, it is underpinned by Swift data and has CloudKit sync. So if you start on the Mac, it'll follow you on iOS. If you start on iOS, it'll sync your stuff to the Mac and so on. There's a lot of cool stuff that I'm planning on putting in here to make it like the one-stop shops for software update and visibility and automation and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully that sounds interesting to some of you. Thank you very much for taking the time. If anyone has a question, I don't know, Liam, have I got time for a question? Yeah?
So where are most of the smarts for this? Are they in the app itself, or is it in like behind Jamf API?
Yeah. The question was where does the logic in the smarts live? Is it within the Jamf API or is it somewhere else? So it's a wonderful question. Effectively, what the app does is it pulls. There are some tools that are available out there. So why am I blanking on the one tool that's like amazing and that everybody uses for software update? Sofa, thank you. It does not use Sofa. I do something similar to what Sofa does, which is I pull from Apple the feed and then I sanitize that myself, and then use the Jamf Pro APIs to be able to pull in all the devices from your organization, and then I will basically use Apple's data and your data about your devices and kind of filter that data between each other and then tie whichever version is specific to that device to that machine. Does that make sense? So if you've got an iPhone 14 Pro, I'll run it through the Apple data and it will tell me every version that is available of the operating system that's signed for that device. And then I can work out whether that's whether it's up to date or not, and whether there's any versions available for it. So it's basically a combination of Apple stuff and Jamf stuff, and then I'm serving all of this stuff using declarations. So it's using like the latest and greatest, bleeding edge stuff. So thanks for the question. I'll send you the money later. That's good. That was a good question. Anyone else? Cool. If not, jamf.it/upgrade manager. So currently, and this is one thing that trips a lot of people up, we've got surprisingly a lot of people that have been testing it, given it's only been available for like 9 days. One of the big things that trip people up that I need to do a better job of communicating in the UI is that one of the filters that I put in place is that it has to have been seen within the last 60 days. So it automatically won't put it in the UI if it hasn't been seen recently. Yes. I don't know whether that's reasonable or not. Like I had some higher education customers that were like, yeah, that's not good enough for us, but maybe that will be something you could change later. So yeah, cool. I've talked plenty, so thank you, everybody. Thanks, thank you very much.
Grabbing the teeny tiny microphone, which only works for the stream. Right, so we're going to take, what, 5 minutes, grab a beer, go for a wee, and we'll be back shortly. Thanks very much. Oh, wait, I need Neil back, because I don't know what button you press to make the video come back on. So everyone at home can listen to my dulcet tones, but they can't see me. This is probably for the best. Right. And now I've realised that they can hear me, but they can't see the pretty pictures. See? Thank God we've got someone. Thank God I've got this hat on. Right, so next up we have Rob. He's going to talk about people problems.
That's what I'm here for. Normally I'm the people problem, but that's okay. Hello folks, how are we all doing? There we go, that's the energy we need. Just to talk about cybersecurity. Everyone's favourite topic, yeah? Cool. So cybersecurity is a people problem. And I think this is something we all know. So cybersecurity, a huge problem for all of us in amongst everything that we do. Obviously we hand people laptops, so it becomes a problem immediately. Some scary stats that I didn't just source from the internet, I promise. But we've seen a massive uptick in attacks, a massive uptick in the surface that's deployed. Even talking about some of the stuff that the other talks have been on about. So Homebrew, obviously a vector for attack. All the AI stuff Jack was talking about, a vector for attack. Not to target Homebrew, just to be clear. That's fine. It's only because you're here. So it's a huge problem, and it's only going to get worse as we go along. So, apologies, I couldn't find a decent image of that wasn't all grainy and about this big. So what do we do about this? As Scotty said, the right tool for the right job. And what most people do is we get the credit card out. Look how much money is spent on cybersecurity tools. It's huge. Now, what do we think happens with most of that spend? Where does that data go? It goes into a SIEM tool. That's great. We get some great charts. We get some great spreadsheets. And we spend a huge amount of time fixing vulnerabilities in our laptops. We spend a huge amount of time upgrading stuff. And we've done it here at Jigsaw. Now, to be clear, this is not a Jigsaw talk. I should have said that up front. This is something different. But, there's a huge amount of time and effort spent in this in the industry. In our world, I'm sure everybody here spends a lot of time trying to fix stuff, buy the newest, latest version of antivirus, EDR, all these kind of things. And then we do this. We hand the person with the laptop some training that looks like this. We'll just pretend that logo's not there. And people go through the training. Who here, hands up, who here has clicked through the training like this? Clicked all the bubbles and gone next, 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 next. Got to the quiz, done it 4 times. Not got it right, written the answers down, phoned a friend. Yeah? And gone round and round and round to get it right. Yeah? My own story is that this all started because we had a fire safety one that none of us could do. Colours of fire extinguishers and stuff, it was a nightmare. But this is what we end up with. All of our security tools are only as good as the people using the devices. And if they don't understand the problem, then it's all for nothing, because at the end of the day, they're going to click the link in the email. You can send 1,000 phishing simulations, and they're great. Your users learn how you write phishing simulations or how the vendor writes phishing simulations. Exactly. There's a whole bunch. What you're teaching people is how to identify something very specific. And then everybody looks at their stats for their things and go, great, the stats are ticking up. And then they go, why are we still having loads of cybersecurity incidents? Simple as that. This is what happens over and over again. I've had this conversation with loads and loads of people. So what do we do? Well, let's think about a different way of doing training instead. What do people enjoy? People enjoy doing things together and having a bit of a laugh while they do it. Now, this is some old photos from events we did. Points, if anybody knows who this is. Nobody's as old as me, maybe. For now, who was that? Neil, good work, yeah. That's it. It's good old Fred Downage. And this was a game that we came up with a long time ago to try and show that there's other ways to teach people cybersecurity. Because at the end of the day, it's not the most exciting topic. Okay, we know this. But it is a massively important one to a lot of us. So we came up with a bunch of different ways to do it. The case that was in these the previous photos was a game called Corrupted. This is some different games that we made. Now, obviously, we've gone all out on this, but there is the opportunity for doing these kind of things yourself. I'm not necessarily here to sell you anything. I just want to make the point to you that there's different ways to do training. So what we came up with was a kind of escape room style game where we bring teams in and we would take them through scenarios in the form of a story. We'd make it lighthearted. We'd make it, it's full of puns because people like a chuckle. And then we'd add interactive elements to it. So things like the QR code here, the QR code Jigsaw. You find the pieces as you go through, you unlock things, you answer questions in the story to take you to the next part of the game, and that's the app on the laptop there. And really, it was to just get people to engage with us a little bit, because we just found no other good way to do it. The training doesn't help, the paperwork, nobody reads. What we did after the Corrupted game was we took photos of the teams. We went back like a year and a half later. Those photos were still on people's desks. They remembered that day because they had a bit of a laugh doing it. It's amazing how many people can't put together a jigsaw like that. It's fascinating to watch. I've watched some very senior security people from massive companies just not be able to do it and walk away in anger. It's quite funny. I do enjoy that a little bit. Training is key to security, but more than leads to poor engagement, which leads to cyber incidents. Keep it engaging and keep it fun. There's lots of ways to do this stuff. And bless you. And it's something that it varies from organization to organization, because having kind of light-hearted training doesn't work everywhere. Like, we've had conversations with banks, conversations with big financial industries, insurance companies, but then you have conversations with creative agencies that want to do very specific things. And it's all about understanding your audience and showing that it doesn't need to just be a little quick quiz to say next, next, next. The reason I'm gotten into too much detail is the beauty of this way of thinking about it. If gamification in training applies to anything, you can take any training and turn it into something engaging with a little bit of imagination. And it doesn't need to be the lengths we went to with lots of kits and props and stuff. You can do it in just a more entertaining way. We did a project with Heineken, where we took some data quality training they did. Now, I don't know if any of them is a data scientist. I know I'm not. and I did not understand what they gave us. I'm sure it was very, very cool if you're a data scientist, but it was unintelligible to the rest of us. They put this out into the business and nothing happened. In fact, people just ignored it completely. There was no point to it. We took that training and turned it into something that people kind of resonated with by turning it into a game. We referenced their internal tools, used their, even down to their font, they were quite strict on brand, to try and make it feel like it was part of their world, not just part of something we delivered to them. And obviously all that sounds very expensive, which it can be, but there's other things you can do. So I've got an example here. Something that worked really well, which is really easy to do with a bit of time. Here we've got a fishing training comic. Now, you chuckle, it's amazing the uptake this had. Companies really, really engage with this because you throw it in the break room and people just go, what's that? Because it's bright and colorful. It's exactly the same information that's in the slides, just presented in a different way. And that's the point I'm trying to get to today, is that you need to think about training, not just in the way of ticking the box, because that's what people do. They go to KnowBe4 or one of a dozen other providers, buy the training, email it round, tick, job done, right? Compliance complete, but it doesn't actually have an impact. Something like this, very cheap to make, with a bit of imagination, throw it into the break rooms and see the impact it has. We've seen this work in kind of some quite big companies, some very unexpected places too. And yeah, it's just, people look at it and go, it's for kids. And it works well for kids as well, because it's good to teach in schools. We've done a bunch of stuff in schools with Essex Police, just because the stuff is kind of engaging, colourful and lighthearted. So what we do with it, we kind of, as I said earlier, we want to make sure that companies see it and think that there's more to this than just another training provider, because there's no difference. People will have KnowBe4 or whoever. We'll come along and say, we can help you with this. Now, this is a little bit of shilling from me, but so, like I said, we want to deliver training in an engaging way. That's the key to all of this. Don't just do the slides. And then we want to, as I said earlier, for Heineken, we want to really match company style and brand, because that's really important to a lot of places. Makes it feel like it's not a third-party training company, makes it feel like it's something internal. All of our games have videos and the physical assets. We'll customize them for customers as well to make it look like something that makes sense to them. That's two examples of the old kits we used to make. Heineken green, the trouble we had getting green boxes. The right green. Anyway, and those stickers, I never want to see them again. So this other one, the red one, is actually for Chanel. That's their internal cybersecurity brand that they did across Europe. And those kits were customized to English and French, because they have a lot of French speaking. And they recorded their own videos. It was their cybersecurity, sort of their CISO that was the bad guy in the game, because it resonated with people. It made it feel real, which is, really is what it is all about, to make people understand that this is not just mandatory training they have to fill in, but something that actually means something to them. We actually don't use the coloured boxes anymore because they don't ship very well. DPD is not kind. And yes, we've had quite a few delivered in little bits, which is never a great experience when you've shipped them halfway around the world. So I want to do another little bit of shameless self-promotion, if that's okay. Training is important, right? That's the key here. That's the only thing I want you to take away is training is important. However, we all love a good murder. So something else we do, and this is purely a shill from me, we do some detective murder mystery games. You can buy them on Amazon. Just a bit of fun for Christmas. Yeah, I couldn't resist the opportunity to get a quick shill in while I've got a captive audience. And so that's our website, murdermission.com, for the murder mystery games. However, got to have some swag. Some people have already picked up the bags I see. Up at the back, and there's some more over there that we'll dish out. There's actually a copy of one of our games, because I thought the best way for me to show you what I'm talking about is to just give you a copy and you can have a look. Now, I'm not expecting to come and buy anything from me. That's not really what the talk's about. It's more just to demonstrate what you can do with a little bit of time and imagination. So up at the back, as I say, in the black bag, is a copy of a game called The Codfather. The idea here is you have to find out who's hacked Melissa McCarthy. That's the chuckle I wanted. Lots of puns in it. We're not sorry. So it's kind of a chase the hacker style game. So you have to figure out, how this has happened. You access online resources. There's a bunch of paperwork in the folder that you have to try and figure out what's gone on. And just have a go and have a think about how you could apply that to your business. Not necessarily our work, but something you guys could do yourselves to try and help improve your own cyber posture, because at the end of the day, as I say, you have all the best tools in the world. If your people don't know what's going on or don't understand why it's important, it's not going to make any difference. And that's it. Thanks very much. Don't know if there's any questions or anybody's any thoughts? No? Perfect. Cool. Thank you very much, folks.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you track how effective whatever service can be?
Yeah. So the question there was, how do we track how effective the service, the sort of training can be? It's a great question, and it's a very difficult one because it all depends on what you're looking to get from it. The way that we track in the games is we actually track things like incorrect answers to questions. We track how many times people have made incorrect answers to show where the gap lies. So the idea being, let's say you and 200 people play it, and you see a trend in that data. What's very difficult to see, and this is the part where I think the phishing email stuff comes in, people look as a reduction in that number as we've improved our cyber posture, but it's not, because you're checking one very small section. What we're trying to show is where are the gaps in your current training, and then with these games, we can customize them. We would make versions of the game that would then match the missing parts, and then you'd run the games again one of our games is Beat the Hacker. We have Beat the Hacker 1, 2, and 3 with different things in it, and it's all mix and match depending on what companies are after. Companies tend to have a very specific use case, and then we'd run that, look at the stats, and go, you're weak in, QR code phishing, for example. Everybody's got this wrong a dozen times, or it took them a long time to answer, and then you can train based on that, because there is no magic metric for we're all good now. It doesn't exist because it moves so quickly, and there's people at the end of the day. So yeah, it's a tough one. That it's a very common question.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any more?
I've got another question.
Yes, ma'am.
So in it, you are tracking participation.
Yeah.
Because I think the big thing for cybersecurity training, as you alluded to, is the checkbox.
Yes.
Which is not necessarily driven by quality, but discount on cyber insurance.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. You're right. I think all the tracking, we would, for example, when you start the game, it asks you for your name or your email address, again, depending on what the company wants to track. We still would class it as mandatory training, and you can still use that data to show this is what's been done. We sometimes, depending on the engagement, we would do things like leaderboards, where there's maybe a prize for the fastest time. But what that's really doing in the background is tracking all the people that have played it. But then we do it in a way of, again, trying to gamify that data to make it seem like there's a prize to be won, Amazon vouchers or something.
Nice. And so if I was going to think about taking on something like this for my organisation, giving me the opportunity to, how would it roughly compare to thinking about a traditional training system from Notebook?
It depends exactly what would be needed. The question there was basically boils down to how much, which is a perfectly valid question, right? It varies massively because it depends on what the engagement's looking for. We do different ways of implementing it, where you could take, for instance, the Codfather, which is the one in the envelope up the back, as stands, in which case it would be much cheaper than if you want something that's completely customized to suit what you want. We have different ways of doing that just based on time and effort, basically. Recording videos takes a long time, for example. Or you just do it on a phone, but some people are better at it than others. We've had some interesting videos over the years. Yes, ma'am.
Are they like instructor-led, or is it just like, here's a package, go off and do it?
It's designed to be, so the question was, is it instructor-led or is it standalone? It's standalone training. It's designed so you don't need people to come in and facilitate it. It depends. which games it is. Some games require someone to kind of reset it when it's finished, but it's all led by the game. So the person in the room might just be there for if people get completely stuck, but the game manages itself as you go through.
I'm just thinking of being from a social engineering perspective, it would be really useful to have someone there who was just casually talking, and then at the end of the thing demonstrated, that's what social engineering is. I now have all this information about you. So I've seen that done.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that we could easily build into one of the games, and that's the whole point of what we're trying to do. Is because everybody has different requirements and different things that they want to train. There is no one cybersecurity training course that covers every company, and some of the big ones will tell you that, but it's not true. It depends exactly what you want, which is where we add the customization to say that's my point to you guys, is to try and make it engaging for your audience. That's what matters most, because the minute you give them another slide deck that's stuff they don't care about, all is lost at that point. Cool. Any more? All good? Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay, and last up we have Scott to talk DDM, because is it a London Apple admin meetup if no one talks about DDM? Is that hypothetical, rhetorical, one of those? Anyway, thank you, Scott.
Thanking you. Right then. Oh, did it?
Sorry, Scott.
That's all right. Yes, there we go, done. To the pub.
How is it? There you go.
Is it that simple? Turn it on and off again?
Room full of IT people.
It was that simple. There you go. Oh, wow. Okay, here we go. Perfect. There we go. Great. Good evening. So I am very aware we are overrunning, and I am now the person holding you from the pub, which is never the person you want to be, especially when you're Scottish as well. And so my next slide was going to be this, and I thought, oh no, that's a bit risky for anyone who didn't watch the football. And then my third slide was going to be that. So I was like, okay, we probably want to skip past this. Yeah. Steady. We have hope against Haiti. That's anyway. So back to the real questions, right? What the DDM? This all kind of came about because two things. Yes, I work for Jamf, but this is not a Jamf presentation, as you can see tonight. A lot of people ask me, like, oh, can you do this with DDM? Can you do that? And they don't. And then my other half, she asked me one night, what is it you do? And that's the wrong question to ask a geek, because what they will do is they'll build you a presentation and tell you what they do. So this kind of came out of two of those things. So again, this is all through my own research, all through documentation, my own testing, etc. None of this is Jamf related, etc. So don't blame Jamf if any of this goes wrong. But we all have this problem, right? Today we use MDM, and this is kind of the communication that we use on a device, right? And again, we can use that for one device, but then we start to scale up. And it becomes really intensive. So again, when you want to do one action like install an app or maybe just get a device to check in, it becomes extremely communicative across our whole fleet, which is not great. And Apple acknowledged this as well, and this is why they built DDM, was to make it a bit more state aware. Does anyone know when DDM was introduced at all with a device where you can actually implement it? Would you say in the past? Yes, very much so in the past. It was actually way back in 2021, which feels really old, doesn't it? Yeah, 22, yeah. But kind of odd, right? You think, God, has it been around that long, right? We're almost about to hit like 2026, which feels scary. So yeah, it has been around that long. But the great thing that this gives us is it's more autonomous and proactive, so the device starts to make the kind of choices for itself. We don't necessarily need that communication to the server all the time, which is really useful. And we have some really interesting parts around reporting as well for status channels and such. But the most important thing is a lot of people come to me and they go, yeah, we don't want to use MDM anymore, we want to use DDM. And they kind of don't understand it, because I'm like, well, you know, DDM gets activated by MDM. That could change in the future, but as we all speak here today, you need MDM still, right? MDM is still key for that. But really what DDM comes down to is these 4 different things. I am going to exclude the states channel just now, but declarations are these types of things. I am going to call it DDM because declarations for a Scotsman, again, is really hard because I roll my R's constantly. So I'd just be sitting here all night doing that, but we'll concentrate on these 4 different declaration types, which I will call DDM. And these give us a few different things around passcodes, certificates, predicates, and static info, which we'll kind of break these down. And again, this is not vendor specific, right? I just want to break down into the Apple, like pure JSON. Like, what does this mean for me as an admin? What can I do with this? And this is where I got to with this. So the first one that I want to start with was configurations, because this is probably the easiest one that we as Mac admins or Apple admins tend to just get straight away, because this is the do this instructions. I want you to apply this. I want you to do that. And again, you probably use a lot of these in the MDM world today. There's a way you can bring them in to declarations, and there's a way that you can convert traditional MDM configuration profiles into declarations as well. This topic, because I only have 15 minutes to do this and I'm keeping you off the pub, we will not cover that today, but you can do that. But most importantly, configurations are state aware and declarative. So the device itself can make the choice, not necessarily checking in with the MDM server. So that's the key difference when it comes to why would I use this over MDM? Well, what potentially the future might hold is we scope everything to all our fleet, and we let the device then decide based on some stuff that we will come to later. But what we've got is a very easy, simple configuration, right? I'm pretty sure if I was to ask most of you, please can you write a passcode policy as a configuration profile today? You'll be like, yeah, no problem at all. I'm a whiz with XML. I can get that done. Easy peasy. The same is true for declarations. It's just JSON, right? But the key things still matter. We still need to kind of call out what it is that we want to apply to. So in this case, it would be the passcode settings. And then we have a unique identifier. The only slight change here is we then have a server token, because that is what the device would subscribe to say, has there been updates to this? Because again, you might want to update this and the device can check in proactively to do that. So really simple. We then come to assets, and that's where things get really interesting. Because what we can then start to do with that is we can use these to make our configurations a bit more modular. So maybe today where you potentially push down a certificate for Wi-Fi and then a certificate for VPN and another certificate, etc., what you can start to do is with assets, you can push down multiple, or you can push down one asset and multiple different configurations can call that. Makes it much easier to use on the device, and it saves us having to constantly push things to the device. The device can then be state aware and call that asset back itself. The raw JSON, like I said, just looks like this. You might want to push down, for an example, the email address of a user, and then multiple different configurations can reference that. So you maybe want to use that email address in something like Outlook plus authenticating to your VPN plus. Rather than having to either A, get the user to push that into the applications or certificates multiple times, you can actually just get the configurations to call that one asset. So really useful, especially if you may use the user channel on macOS or shared iPad. You can then push down one type of asset, and the multiple different user channels can call that out, which again could link into things like platform SSO in the future. From there, we then have activations, and this is the bit that's like really cool. This is the bit we're all going to love. This is the whole point of DDM. This is where we kind of have this logic layer that says, okay, we now have these configurations, but we only want you to apply these if you match this criteria. So today, you are probably doing this server side, right? You as admins go, right, we'll group you, whether that be based on your identity, whether that be based on your device type, or whether that be groups you set up in your MDM. What you can now start to do is deploy everything to your device. And with these activations, they're basically built on Apple's predicate system. You can see at the bottom here, you can then start to tell the device, only activate this configuration if you meet this criteria. So I've chosen this one to be the device model family iPad. So again, this would only activate if you were an iPad, but I could scope it to my whole fleet of devices, Apple TVs, iPhones, macOS, whatever. That becomes really interesting though, if you think about it in the terms of device identifiers, because again, you might have certain Mac models that can only do certain things, and we can call that out, or potentially software versions. because then you can start to state, actually, this only applies to macOS 26. So we can deploy this to our device that is running macOS 15, but it will not activate until you have upgraded. I see you have a question on this. You wait to the end. Okay, perfect, great. We might not have time to the end, but you can ask me in a pub. I'll definitely come to the pub. There we go, perfect. So again, just as an example to call that out, we've got 3 configurations here. 2 will apply and 1 will not apply because it doesn't meet that activation predicate. Again, I don't have enough time to go into predicates. I can write a whole 40-minute talk on predicates, never mind 15 minutes. So again, you have that option there to do that with predicates as well, which is really, really cool. And I think that is the part that is going to make our lives as admins really interesting, but really a lot more useful as well. We then have the final part, management. And this is probably the one that I'm still learning myself. So again, I built this presentation to kind of teach myself and then teach others, like, what is DDM? There's 2 different parts to this. The first one being that Apple says this is how your MDM, or device management service, communicates and tells your device you can do X, Y, and Z. So as they release new features, your vendor has to make that available on the server and then push that to the device to say you can now do X, Y, and Z. The other part is that it says you can put down organizational information, like you can put down the company name, a company phone number, company email address, whatever it is that you want. And I was like, oh, that could be interesting, but where would that appear? Why would you
There we go.
Give me another beer. We'll get it all going.
Substitute mic.
There we go.
There we go.
Perfect. Comedy mic. So yeah, for anyone that didn't notice, they kind of dropped this little bombshell in that stated in the next version of macOS, anything to do with software updates will have to be declarative. So counting down from now, if we were in Vegas and we were all at a blackjack table and we were all betting, and we're probably going to guess that by July time next year, we're probably all going to have some form of DDM workflow in our procedure to make software updates work, or to defer it, or to whatever it is that Apple will do next with software updates. So see Luke's talk from earlier, get on the software update train and also get on the DDM train at the same time. If you aren't on that, then yeah, macOS 27, should we bet? It is maybe going to be slightly tricky for you. So definitely pester your vendor if they aren't implementing that yet. Cool. So before I go and before this mic runs out and before I hold you from the pub any longer, just some really good resources. Apple have got 2 videos, 10131 if you search on the developer page, and 10041 if you like codes like I do. You can watch those videos. They're both worth a watch. 2023 doesn't necessarily cover everything that's in 2021, so definitely watch them both. And again, the Apple platform deployment guide has a lot of good resources as well in terms of just breaking down some of that and what it means for admins, not necessarily the developer code, but just how it works on a device and the device's state aware. Like I say, things are changing, and Apple have already dropped that hint, which they don't normally do publicly. So take that hint, and if you aren't, get on Appleseed and test the betas, because again, wouldn't surprise me if more stuff comes, right? So get into that testing cycle now, so that when June and July comes next year, you aren't all panicking, hairs on fire, and you end up like me, bald. And if you want, there's some really interesting blogs from vendors out there that, again, I can share the links to later. But if you just search DDM and what it means for Apple devices, these 3 things will come up. And they're really useful for just actually breaking down how vendors think about it and how they want to implement it, because it is actually quite a big back-end change for them as well. Not just delivering to devices, but devices basically constantly talking to them and going, hey, by the way, I've now changed, I've done this, I need this, which is kind of the opposite to what they are used to. And with that, I also didn't even get to cover the status channel, which is a whole different beast in itself. So again, Apple have done a lot in this forum about the device generally chatting, like say, to the device server now, to the MDM server now, or the device management service. I can't remember what we are, but Apple have changed it. We are something. But that now talks to us like when a device now updates, even before the user gets back to the desktop on a Mac, the devices communicate to MDM to let you know, I am now on macOS 26. And that's a very different workflow. Which again, if you're using predicates and activations, it could potentially apply configurations before it's even booted. So very different way to work. So yeah, with that, I think I've got 1 minute left. Questions?
So, have Apple got any documentation on the immutability of DDM? So you apply a configuration to a device. It's JSON, whatever. You can no doubt read it. You can have a script or in EA or something, and you go, okay, read this declaration that you've got on the device. Tell me that you've got it on the device, and tell me what the contents are. So yes, we know that we put it down, but we need to prove that it's actually on the device, because our compliance people want to know it's on the device. They're not going to accept that just because we've sent it to the device, they're not going to automatically agree that it's on the device unless the device tells us. But with DDM, sorry, that was with MDM.
Yep.
Conflict protocol. With it's saying, I've got this and I'm doing this thing. And so that's not got any documentation around the immutability of things on the device. So even an admin can't come along and go, oh, I want to remove that config. But because it's come from an MDM, which is trusted, and it's in the whole AD kind of.
Yep.
You can't do that. It's a supervised device. No, even root can't do it.
Yeah, so you're kind of talking about verification and overriding it potentially on the device itself. Honestly, I don't have an answer, but it would it would be like MDM today. I guess it depends on what you're delivering to that device and how impactful that might be to a device. If it's a wallpaper and you're not enforcing it, user may be able to change it, right? If it's something more deep underlying, then yes, it might not be changeable. But from a reporting point of view, there is a lot of reporting that you can gather back. I think vendors are just not caught up on that part yet either. But there is a lot, and there's even ways you can actually subscribe to say, I know this device, oh, it's gone off. I know this device has this version of this declaration, and I know this device has this version of declaration. There's a way you can actually like audit that log as well to say what version of the declaration it has, depending on what it's received and what it's not checked in and such like that. There is ways to do that and see how it's triggered. You might not be able to read that in a console just yet, if that's what you're asking.
We'll soon find out.
Yeah. No more questions. There we go. All good. There you go.
Thanks, Scott. That was amazing, but both in timing and in content and in breaking the microphone. Just kidding. Right then, so I guess we are done. So thanks, Jigsaw, for letting us hang out in your space. Thanks, Workbrew, for presentations, pizza, beer, all the things that make life worth living. And without any further ado, I suppose we should all leave and let Liam, tidy up so we can go to the pub. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for turning up.